Welcome to Keeping It Real, the largest podcast made by real estate agents and for real estate agents. My name is DJ Paris. I am your guide and host through the show. And today is our monthly series called Closing Time with Chris Linsell from theclose.com. Now, this is a partnership between Keeping It Real and theclose.com. And let me tell you about The Close. Theclose.com is the kind of real estate website designed to give agents, teams, and brokerages actionable strategic insight from industry professionals. They cover real estate marketing, lead generation, technology, and team building strategies from the perspective of working agents and brokers who want to take their business to the next level. Please visit theclose.com. That's THECLOSE, theclose.com, and subscribe to their newsletter so you can be notified every time they publish an article. And with us, as always, is Chris Linsell. Now, he is a staff writer and real estate coach for The Close. Now, Chris is The Close's resident expert on real estate topics ranging from marketing, lead gen, transactional best practices, and everything in between. He's a licensed agent in the state of Michigan, and Chris has been part of hundreds of real estate transactions from modest rural starter homes to massive waterside compounds. When he isn't writing, you'll find Chris fly fishing or performing on stage, although maybe not as maybe virtually at the moment for his local community theater production, although we are always excited. But Chris did just have a big project. So what you see behind him is his newest DIY project for shelving. But Chris, welcome once again to Keeping It Real. We're excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks, DJ. Yeah, I'm standing in front of my brand new video background. I'm not very handy with hammers and nails, but I can figure out how to put, some stuff on the wall. So here we are.
For our listeners, you'll have to just click on the video to see this, but for our viewers, you'll see it. It really does look like a virtual background because it is so sort of perfectly done. I said to Chris, I was like, "Oh, where'd you get the virtual background?" He's like, "Oh no, I made that." So, so well done.
Thanks.
So today we're talking dual agency.
Yeah,
let's talk about it. Go ahead. I know you have a lot of thoughts about it.
Where to begin? I guess I'll put it to you this way. We'll kick things off by just saying I mentioned a couple of things, and not controversial things, like pretty normal run-of-the-mill things about dual agency on Twitter and on LinkedIn. And I was getting direct messages until like 3 a.m. from people with very strong viewpoints on this topic. And I've always in Michigan, dual agency is legal, and it's been something even as a young agent I didn't totally understand, other than the fact that you could double dip a transaction and earn twice the money on it. And so it kind of seemed like a bingo moment to me. Like maybe I should just be all doing nothing but dual agency.
Sure.
But
I want twice the amount of money. Sure.
Right. For really not twice the amount of work. Let's just call a spade here. Dual agency is a hot topic in real estate, and I'm actually working on a long form piece about dual agency for The Close right now. I'm sure that's going to ruffle some feathers, which I'm looking forward to, and love to talk about it with you. Let's dig into it. Let's get into the nitty gritty on it.
So yeah, and we should also talk about, we have a nationwide audience. So where you live may allow dual agency, it might not. I know here in Illinois, it is technically allowed, as in Michigan where Chris is. However, we keep hearing rumblings, although we've been hearing them for at least here in Illinois for at least 10 years of people saying, it's going away. It'll eventually not be an option.
Yeah.
As of right now, it still is. We have 700 brokers at our company. Our official policy at our firm is we sort of really, we allow it, but we sort of get very nervous about it. As a brokerage, we encourage our agents to explore other ways to service the client or clients, because it just puts it makes us very nervous.
And honestly, like reasonably so. And the big, I'll say reasonably so, maybe even appropriately so, that in Alaska, Colorado, Florida, Kansas, Maryland, Oklahoma, Texas, and Vermont, dual agency is illegal. It's been banned. And I don't mean like discouraged by the state associations. Like there's a law Somebody voted on a law that said dual agency is not allowed. And I can tell you through research for this piece I'm doing for the close, I can tell you out of those 8 states where it's illegal, 5 of those states, the laws came into place as a result of repeated litigation against
Sure.
real estate agents and brokerages, because buyers or sellers felt as if those agents were not fulfilling their contractual duties to them as a result of representing both parties. So this isn't like a dandelion in the front yard kind of decision. These decisions are being made as a result of litigation and significant financial penalties for breach of contract by the or alleged breach of contract. So this is definitely something that is a serious issue and is worth talking about.
And also, yeah, thanks. You're absolutely right. And and I remember when I was in real estate school, they were talking about this years ago, was that, even though if you do a dual agency transaction, years down the road, one of the parties could still look back at the transaction. Now, I imagine there's a certain amount of time they would have to do this, but there is, from my understanding, there are years in to be able to then say, and now that I'm thinking about it, my agent represented both sides, and I don't feel so good about that anymore. And I want to maybe explore a legal action, or at least creating an issue for that agent's licensing, maybe submitting something to the state board about feeling that wasn't maybe the most professional solution for them. So obviously there's a lot of, and then there are other people who, agents who absolutely love doing dual agency. They will defend it. They don't see it as a problem. So you're right. It's very, very hot button. Should we talk about maybe the arguments for and against, or?
Yeah, that sounds great. So I'll just give you a really quick, hit list of the classic reasons why people support dual agency. And full disclosure here, I have been a dual agent before. I am not, calling for my high horse for something that I haven't investigated personally. So here are some of the benefits that I know, and that through kind of the industry that work out. So first of all, there's a possible cost saving for sellers when you are a dual agent. And here's what I mean by that. In my experience, it's pretty common. In fact, I've got it in my my boilerplate listing contracts. When it comes to commissions, I'll identify the commission. I'll say commission for this sale will be 6%, unless the selling agent, me, brings the buyer for the property, in which case the commission for this sale, total commission, will be 4.5%. So that 1.5% savings occurs as a result of double siding. And I build it right into my listing contract, because it is frequently an objection that comes up when I'm having listing appointments. So I answer that objection early. So possible cost savings for sellers. That's the first potential upside. The next upside is potentially faster and more efficient communication. I don't know about you. I've dealt with real estate agents who really literally could not use their phone. They were like, I don't know how to use this thing. I don't know the text. I didn't even know I got text messages. I'm not making that up. That is a real thing. And
or even worse, like the voicemail's full and you need to communicate something. Yeah.
Voicemail full. I want to throw my own phone out the window when I hear somebody else's voicemail is full message. So when you have one agent dealing with the entire transaction, communication is a little bit easier. You have a hub for communication rather than 2 cans at the end of a string. So there's another one. It's on the same vein, easier organization of paperwork, of showings, of closings. On all of these things where you have to get people together on, you essentially have 4 parties that you have to coordinate. You have to coordinate the buyer, the seller, the buyer's agent, and the seller's agent. And if not everybody can get together, then you get frustrating scenarios here. With one less agent in the mix, potentially things could be a little bit smoother, a little bit easier to deal with.
Sure.
So that's another upside. And then the last upside, and let's just call a spade here, there's a possible increase in commission for agents. I mean,
Sure.
as a listing agent, of course I want to make 1.5 or 2 times what the commission would typically be for me on this. So there's a financial benefit for me in this scenario. And so, those are easy benefits to dual agency.
And I'll even add an additional benefit that is related to one of the ones you mentioned, which was cost savings to the seller. And it also to a savvy buyer. Let's say there's an agent who isn't offering a cost savings to their seller, and says, to the dual agent, "Hey, I'm happy to have you as my agent, and I know you represent the seller. I would like a reduction in the overall fee." So that's something that any party could ask for as well, which is also a possible savings.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So these, and I'm sure that there are others, smaller ones, market specific ones. I'm not going to get into all of that right now, but there are some like theoretical top line benefits to dual agency. So let's just call that out and make it clear, recognized. That's a part of the conversation here. But there's definitely some drawbacks, right?
Yeah.
There are definitely and we'll just start with the big one here. There's an inherent conflict of interest when you are representing both sides of a real estate transaction. As a appointed fiduciary for your client, your primary, mission in your job is to represent the best interests of your client. And as a seller's agent, the best interest of your client centers around getting the most money possible for their property. And as the fiduciary for the buyer, the best interest centers around getting the least amount of money, to agree to a contract.
Sure.
So how can that happen? There's a conflict of interest here. You can't be representing, or you can't be essentially coaching two different teams, in the same game and saying, well, I want both teams to win.
Right.
One team is going to win and one team is going to lose. And that's maybe a poor analogy, because ultimately the best real estate transactions are where everybody feels like they're a winner. But you really can't, especially when it comes to price, it's really rare that you can say with confidence, I am representing the best interests of both sides of this transaction simultaneously.
Yeah, especially if there's negotiation, right? There's not always negotiation, of course, which probably makes dual agency a bit more appealing or a little bit more easier to navigate ethically. But when there's negotiation, it's sort of like as the dual agent, you're sort of negotiating with yourself.
Yeah, 100%. And actually that kind of leads into the other two kind of major drawbacks to dual agency, which is you have less ability to advise your sellers and your buyers. And what I mean by that is, go back to that game analogy. When you're just a buyer's agent or just a seller's agent, you are like the coach for your team. But when you become a dual agent, you're more like the referee of the game at that point. And
Right.
you can do much less as far as advising your clients, because another tenet of a successful real estate professional is you're holding confidential information confidential. And so you can't advise your clients using information that you've gained from the other party without violating that confidentiality. And this is what makes the last point, negotiations, more difficult. If for instance, if you're a seller's agent and you know that your client got a job transfer and they got to be out of town in 60 days, you know that client is going to be motivated and would potentially accept a lower than asking price offer. But you can't tell that to your buyer because this is confidential. You can't do it with a wink and a nod either. That is the sort of thing, specifically, I remember reading, specifically in the state of Maryland and Oklahoma, that specific instance where a seller felt like their confidential information was communicated non-verbally, and this held up in court. It was literally my agent used the wink and nod communication style to communicate to the buyer's agent in order to grease the wheels to get a contract done. And that is the sort of thing that is, not only is it a detriment to everybody involved, including the real estate professional, because you're going to get sued and you're going to potentially lose your license, but the buyers and the sellers are going to be losers as well. Because you better believe, even if you're the buyer and you're the recipient of that wink and a nod, and all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I got some insider info, you're fooling yourself if you don't think that your agent is also giving
Of
winks and
course.
nods to the other side here.
Yeah, that's a really, really strong point. So the negotiation part of it is problematic at maybe the that's maybe the lightest way to say it. It's
Mm-hmm.
problematic.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, holding all of those things equal here, dual agency is possible. I think theoretically, on paper, it's possible to do ethically and legally. It's just a really fine line to walk, and it's a really specific set of circumstances where that becomes an acceptable
Sure.
and, really a, unimpeachably moral and ethical process. So, I'm not going to spoil the soup or anything. It's pretty clear where, kind of where I fall on this. But you'll find out if you read the article. It's going to come out on the close in a couple of weeks here. You're going to find out, like, I'm a supporter of legal, ethical real estate, and if that includes dual agency, great. If you can do it that way. But I am calling on real estate agents, and I'll just do it right here. You get the world premiere of this call. I'm calling on real estate agents to set the bar so incredibly high,
Yeah.
for themselves and for their market, that dual agency should become a rare thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I was, while you were explaining this, I was trying to think of examples that maybe fall into the ethical dual
Mm-hmm.
agency category or
Mm-hmm.
unimpeachable, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, well, if it was a scenario where two parties had already agreed upon a
Mm-hmm.
price before you sort of entered the transaction, and maybe they're related, maybe they're friends,
Mm-hmm.
it's, hey, I'm selling this to my buddy or my, my son or my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And there isn't going to be back and forth negotiation. Like, I know when people, this is a sad example, but when people get divorced, oftentimes they'll use a mediator first.
Yep.
Instead of both hiring attorneys, they come to an agreement, then they both go to an attorney and say, is this fair for both of us?
Mm-hmm.
The attorney says, yeah, and then they can knock it out without the negotiation process of back and
Yep.
forth. But I
Yep.
suspect that would seem to be a potentially reasonable
Mm-hmm.
or option. But are there other scenarios that you can think of where it's yeah? Would love to hear it.
Well, here's one off the top of my head. I don't know if you remember this, but for a while, Zillow offered an option on their website called "Make Me Move," and essentially, homeowners would go to Zillow and they're like, "I don't want to sell my house, but if somebody offered me like the right amount of money, I'd consider it." Zillow got a little hot water for that particular feature and how it was being used by real estate professionals, which is another story for another day. But essentially, this is not an uncommon conversation that real estate agents have with their sphere of influence. In fact, if you're being thoughtful and proactive about maintaining a relationship with your sphere, you are having conversations on the regular with
Sure.
property owners that and that know you and trust you, and you're having conversations like, hey, the market is doing X, Y, and Z right now. It means that your house is probably worth A, B, and C.
Mm-hmm.
As your real estate agent, and you can you call yourself their real estate agent even when they're not. That's a little repeat customer retention tip for everybody there.
Sure.
Always call yourself your past client's real estate agent, no matter what their place in the funnel is. Even if they just bought their house 18 months ago and have no intention of moving for 20 years, call yourself their real estate agent. They will start to think of you like their doctor, their lawyer,
Yep.
their accountant, their real
That's a good
estate
point.
agent. Just get into that zone. So you should be having conversations with the people in your sphere on the regular about the market, about their property, about their investment. Call it their investment. People love hearing how much money their investment is making.
Sure.
And if you're having that conversation, you are going to inevitably there's going to be a response eventually that said, wow, you think I can get ABC for my house? If you could bring me a buyer that would offer me ABC for my house, I'd consider selling. This is an instance where you have a seller who has said, I don't want to put my house on the market, but if there was a buyer who was ever interested in this, I would at this price, I would consider it. And so all of a sudden, and we're getting into pocket listings a little bit here, but essentially what you're doing here is you've got a potential seller, and if you have a buyer you're working with, let's say that buyer's looking for that exact house, and there's nothing on the market, and you say, well, wait a minute, I got Mr. Jones's house. He said if anyone would bring him the right amount of money, he would consider selling. This would be a chance where, we've got a buyer and a seller who wouldn't be able to get together without dual agency. I think that there is a clear case to be made that you are serving the interests of both parties by bringing them together and representing both sides.
Yeah, that's very interesting. What happens if the seller at that point says, hey, now that we got somebody that wants to purchase at this price I set, what if we let's try to get some more money out of it? Yeah. And then you run.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say then you run into the same negotiation potential issue. But you can still pass information. You just can't pass confidential information.
Yeah.
So you're not really able to counsel the client based on the other party's answers. And I just think, boy, that's a tricky thing for any human to be able to do. Because we are not, fully objective creatures. We have subjectivity. We're influenced, and I think it would be if any sort of negotiation process would be very difficult to walk that razor thin line of being ethical, even unintentionally unethical.
Yeah.
I don't think it's always an intentional thing. I don't think most agents probably who do dual agency are even thinking of it as in any way unethical, but being able to actually walk that line is boy, that's challenging.
Well, to put that, to really put a cherry on top, in the state of Texas, there was a lawsuit. It was unsuccessful. But I read the case file on it. There was a lawsuit that a seller brought against their listing agent, that they were unreasonably favoring the offers of buyers that were brought to the table by the listing agent, simply by virtue of there was an open house at the seller's property. Right. This was a really hot neighborhood. They got like 6 offers as a result of just this open house. And when the listing agent brought the offers to the seller, all of the offers that that buyers he was representing, which is 2, he put those on top.
Yeah.
And the seller interpreted that as, you should favor these offers. Or maybe they interpreted it, kind of after the fact, once they kind of, were thinking it through. That lawsuit was ultimately unsuccessful. There was no finding for the plaintiff there. But this is an example of how dual agency can be sticky, and ultimately why real estate agents, you need to set the bar so high for yourself, because the last thing you want is to get involved in an ethics committee hearing with your local board. The last thing that you want is to be brought into civil court and sued for your commission plus damages as a result of unfair representation. That is an experience that nobody wants. And honestly, there's a really easy solution to this, which is if you're a seller's agent and there's somebody who comes to the table as a legitimate buyer, refer that person. Yeah. Send that person to somebody else who can represent them and take a referral fee. That way you still get a portion of the commission. You still get 25% of that buy side, with literally none of the work at that point. You get none of the work and none of the liability.
Yeah. That's such a great point. Yes, you'll give up some of the chunk of the buyer side commission or seller
Hmm.
side commission, depending on what side. But boy, you'll sleep better at night. And I was just, while you were telling this, I was thinking this. I was mentioning the divorce example, and
Hmm.
it popped in my head, and I kind of didn't realize why it popped into my head. And I realized I have a friend who is actually going through a divorce process, and he was married for 30 plus years.
Mm.
So he and his wife, it's a very amicable divorce. And so myself and some friends were chatting with him about this, and his wife is a lovely person, and they are splitting and not fighting through the divorce. But when he first said, we're going to share an attorney and we're going to use a mediator, all of our first thought was, hey, we really like your wife. This is not in any way condemnation of her character. She's
Hmm.
awesome. We love you. You guys are both awesome. But just to protect yourself, you
Yeah.
should probably have your own. And he said, nope, we already agreed on everything. We've got everything good. And so he had to sell us on something that he had already done, and
Mm.
and he's going to do that route, and it's likely going to be fine. But imagine that same scenario now with respect to dual agency. Somebody's talking, hey, my agent helped represent the seller and the buyer. A
Hmm.
lot of just people are going to have a negative response to that, like, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
People who are familiar with it might say, you may want to think of, and you just don't want, from a reputation perspective, whether it's ever an ethics, an ethics hearing about this particular transaction, and whether
Hmm.
you did the right thing or not is yes, obviously important, but even just for your reputation, it might be something to
Yeah.
really think about. Because I know, like I said, with our friend, when he said he's going to use one attorney, several of us in the group had been divorced before, also with amicable divorces. We said, no, you need to get your own attorney. And so again, it just becomes problematic. And again,
Yeah.
that can continue on after the sale indefinitely, really. And that
Yeah.
is something that you'd have to then defend, whether it's legally or just for your reputation.
Hmm.
And I think that would be a difficult conversation to have.
Yeah, 100%. And it's important also to remember here that as as virtuous as the intentions are of the real estate agent who is attempting dual agency, there are going to be some natural pitfalls
Yeah,
that will put you in jeopardy of making a bad decision that are totally outside of your conscious control. And one example of this is it's actually an example by a University of Chicago guy, Steve Levitt and Stephen Dubner, who are the Freakonomics
yeah.
podcast guys and books. They talk about the real estate commission paradox, which is,
I remember reading this in their book.
yeah.
Yeah,
So, like, as a real estate agent, your commission, if you sell a house for $100,000 and you get your 3% seller's commission on that, you're making $3,000 GCI on that.
right.
If you sell the house for $110,000, your commission only goes up by $300. Not
Right.
very much in the grand scheme of things, but for the seller, a $10,000 difference could mean the difference between getting their next house being their dream house or their next house being one they have to settle for.
Right.
And so, as a real estate agent, there is, from a motivations perspective, you have a relatively low financial motivation to do anything outside of satisfy the basic needs of your
Sure.
buyers and sellers. And so, like, just by default, when you double the commission opportunity, your subconscious motivation is
Changes.
even,
Yeah.
yeah, it goes even lower to negotiate strenuously for both parties, because you're realizing, like, as long as we get to a price that both
Yeah. I'm
parties
going to
will.
win as long as we get to a price.
That's
Right.
exactly right. That's exactly right. Because ultimately, what comes down to for double agency is, I'm going to win as long as you both don't just walk away.
Right.
And that should never be the mindset for a real estate professional. Your mindset should not be, I win as long as you are just kind of satisfied a little. Your mindset should be, I win when you get the best deal possible out of
Right.
this. And man, I just there just are so few instances where you as a single professional could get the best deal possible for both clients. It's just there just doesn't make those circumstances just are so few and far between. Save yourself the hassle, make a referral, get some money on the referral, and move on. Don't
Yeah.
don't waste your time trying to figure out why dual agency works, because honestly, academically it does. In practice, maybe doesn't.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember reading that Freakonomics, the argument to be made that what Chris was saying is the upside of the agent is much smaller
That's right.
in as far as their commission, by, if they're a dual agent, for example. Again, they just want to get to, it's not that they want to get to closing, it's that it would be a natural instinct for anyone who's trying to earn income to want to close a deal and earn income. And so if you're a dual agent, like Chris was saying, it's not that you don't want to do the best job for your clients, but you are naturally also inherently now motivated to get the deal closed. And trying to satisfy both clients at the same time is challenging. And as Chris was saying, even for non-dual agency scenarios where you represent a buyer or seller, there is this inherent disparity between your commission and the amount of money that is being outlaid by the seller or the buyer. And yes, it's not really all that proportionate. And I wonder if even down the road, we might even start to see, and what we have seen, flat fee for sure has been around for a long time. Well, I'm curious to see if there may even be more adoption of flat fee style deals where maybe it's not, maybe it's still kind of a percentage. That's where the flat fee number comes from. But maybe it's hey, I think that would be an interesting thing to say to a seller is say, let me explain to you why I don't do a percentage and why I do a flat fee. And you could even use that argument then, the Levitt argument about, I don't want to not be motivated to get you the highest price. I'm going to do the best. Anyway, so I don't know if you've seen that. I don't know how common that is. I know there's low end flat fee business, but for higher end brokers, I don't know how, it's got to be pretty uncommon at this point. But I'm curious if we'll see that.
Yeah, that's my experience too. And honestly, I would love to, in a future episode, let's talk about alternative commissions model, because I think that is a fascinating topic that is scaring the pants off of the established real estate professionals. Because honestly, let's just, I won't dig into it too deep right now, but let's just be honest here. The stalwarts of our industry have made a heck of a lot of money with a system that is based on percentages. And their big bread and butter comes from closing relatively small transactions in terms of numbers of transactions that are really high value, and they make a lot of money on that. And the idea that could get flipped, that you are going more for volume of transactions and a lower dollar value, is scaring a lot of people. But it's, we are in, I'm calling this the Uber economy now, where the disruption from inside industry is occurring. This is not an annual thing. It's a daily thing. There are new disruptions that are happening to established industries every single day. And we're fooling ourselves if we don't think that real estate and especially our commission structure isn't ripe for that disruption. It's going to happen eventually. It's going to be who's going to get there first, which is what we're going to, wait and see.
What a great place to wrap up. What a fun conversation. So dual agency, just everyone should really think long and hard about how comfortable they are with it. Talk to your managing broker, find out your company's policies, talk to your state. You pay dues to get access to your state. Talk to your local association, your state association. Say, hey, what are the pitfalls? How can I do this ethically if I want to do this? Or should I not do this? In certain states, it's not allowed at all. And many states may be following suit. So just be smart. This is your business. And whether or not you ever have any sort of complaint or ethics violation, your reputation is really important. And of course, there are ways to do this to maintain your reputation, but boy, it's tricky. So just use your best judgment. and explore other alternatives. Like Chris said, referring it out. Yes, you won't be receiving all of both sides of the commission, but you're going to have you're probably going to be able to sleep a little easier at night without as much worry about your licensing and also unhappy clients. But Chris, I want to thank Chris, of course, want every one of our listeners and viewers to go visit theclose.com. I am the biggest fan of theclose.com, THECLOSE.com. They also have a member, so it's a free site with amazing articles. They also have a membership section as well, which is incredibly inexpensive, and you get access to lots of their different trainings and tools and other content that is not available to the public. So check it out. There's a free trial as well there. Theclose.com. On behalf of the audience, Chris, we want to say thank you. As always, you're amazing. We're so happy to have this monthly chat with you. And on behalf of Chris and myself, we want to say thank you to our audience. Please, everyone, tell a friend. Think of one other agent that could benefit from hearing from this this conversation about dual agency, and send them a link. Chris is a thought leader. He has researched this, and he's going to have an article. Chris, do we have a publication date for this article yet?
I don't have an exact date, but I would say probably in the next couple of weeks.
Awesome.
You can expect something, and it's just in time for that end of the year, new year, new you conversation. Are you going to be a dual agent in 2021? This is your time to decide.
I'm calling. Thanks. It's funny. It's a good point. I was joking with my team this morning. Next year we're gonna call it new year, same old you, but because. But yeah, it's something to really think about. So everyone, thank you so much for listening. Chris, thank you again. We'll see you next month.
Can't wait. See you soon.